Blaze's frantic barking pierced the silence of the forest as Mark sprinted through the undergrowth. There, shackled to a tree, was Ranger Ethan Cole, bloody, broken, and barely conscious. As Mark rushed to his side, Ethan whispered, "Next time. The dogs." But what happened next will shock even those who thought they'd seen everything. But first, let's go back to the beginning. The sight rooted Mark in place for a single stunned heartbeat before training took over. Ethan's face was a mess of bruises and grime, his ranger uniform torn and caked with dried blood. Thick iron chains snaked around his wrists and chest, pinning him cruelly against the rough bark. His boots were gone, leaving his feet blistered and raw, exposed to the cold dirt. Blaze circled tight, letting out short, distressed whines, while Luna lowered her body to the ground. Her amber eyes locked onto Ethan with fierce protectiveness, as if she could will life back into him. Mark dropped to one knee beside the limp form, his fingers trembling slightly as he reached for a pulse at the ranger's throat. There it was, a flutter, weak but defiant. Relief washed through him, dizzying in its force, but it was quickly chased by a rising tide of fury. Someone hadn't just left Ethan to die. They had made a point of it. They had shackled him here, in his own forest, like a warning nailed to a tree. Blaze nosed closer, his snout pressing against the cold links of the chain, teeth gnashing gently as if trying to chew them apart. Mark muttered reassurances, more for the dogs than himself, as he unclipped the bolt cutters strapped to his belt. His heart thundered in his ears with each heavy snip, the steel resisting stubbornly before giving way with a jolt. As the final link snapped, Ethan slumped forward into Mark's arms, a raw gasp escaping his cracked lips. His body was frighteningly light, all hard muscle and wasted strength, and Mark could feel the fever radiating from his skin even through the layers of dirt. Blaze licked Ethan's temple with frantic, desperate strokes, while Luna leaned her whole weight into Ethan's side, as if anchoring him to the world of the living. Mark pressed his radio to his mouth with shaking hands, voice low and urgent. "Dispatch, this is Deputy Travis. I've located Ranger Cole. He's alive but critical. I need a medical evac to Sector D9 immediately. Repeat, immediately." Static crackled. Then the calm voice of dispatch replied, but Mark barely registered it. His entire focus was on the battered man in his arms, and the searing promise that formed silently in his mind. Whatever monsters had done this, they would not escape justice. Above them, the great pine trees stood silent, bearing witness to cruelty, and now perhaps to salvation. The clearing around them felt wrong, too still, too heavy with the residue of violence. Mark's boots crunched softly over disturbed soil as he moved, every nerve on high alert, senses sharpened by the primal urge to protect the broken man cradled in the dirt. Blaze circled restlessly, nose to the ground, growling low at unseen phantoms, while Luna kept herself pressed tight against Ethan's side, her breathing shallow and rapid. Mark's fingers trembled slightly as he reached out, brushing a stray lock of matted hair from Ethan's forehead. Beneath the grime and blood, Ethan's skin was pale, dangerously so. His cracked lips moved in a dry murmur. No words, just the faint, instinctive call for help. Mark pressed his canteen to Ethan's mouth, tilting it carefully. A few drops of water trickled between the ranger's lips. He swallowed weakly, a reflex more than a conscious act, but it was enough to send a fragile flicker of hope through Mark's chest. Above them, the slashes of red spray paint seemed to bleed from the trunks of the pines, crude, defiant, and chillingly deliberate. "Stay out. Property of the brothers." Not just warnings. Claims. A flag planted in stolen soil. Mark scanned the perimeter, forcing his mind to stay clinical despite the rage simmering beneath the surface. The tracks in the clearing told a grim story. The deep grooves of a dragged body, the scuffled boot prints of multiple men, the heel marks where Ethan had fought, futilely. And there, an old campfire pit, recently disturbed, ashes still faintly warm. They hadn't intended to kill Ethan outright. They had intended to leave him, visible and helpless, a living warning for anyone else who dared patrol these woods. His suffering had been the point. Mark gritted his teeth hard enough that his jaw ached. He knew of the Brothers of the Earth, a fringe group of radical survivalists who believed the government had no claim over God's land. But this was no longer fringe rhetoric. This was open warfare on the people sworn to protect the forest. Blaze barked once, sharply, snapping Mark from his thoughts. The dog stood rigid, ears forward, pointing into the trees as if sensing something just beyond sight. Mark shifted closer to Ethan, instinctively shielding him with his own body. His hand went to the grip of his sidearm. Whatever this was, it wasn't over yet, and they were deep in enemy territory now. The sun had begun its slow descent behind the treetops, bleeding the sky in bruised shades of purple and red. Shadows crept back into the clearing, stretching long fingers over the trampled earth. Mark remained seated on a fallen log, motionless, the cold steel of the broken chains still gleaming at his feet. Their twisted links caught the dying light, cruel reminders of how easily strength could be weaponized against the good. Blaze rested his head heavily on Mark's knee, eyes flickering between exhaustion and alertness, while Luna curled tightly at his side, her tail twitching with restless energy. The dogs, usually so vibrant and eager for their next command, were subdued now, their instincts reading the gravity of the silence around them. Mark's mind replayed Ethan's whisper over and over, a broken mantra that gnawed at the edge of his calm. Next time. The dogs. It wasn't enough for these cowards to shackle a man to a tree like an animal. No, they intended something worse. They wanted to strike at the very heart of what made the canine units more than tools of law enforcement. Loyalty, sacrifice, unconditional trust. They wanted to break bonds so deep that no words could fully explain them. Mark's fingers drifted absent-mindedly through Blaze's fur, feeling the steady thrum of life beneath. These dogs weren't just colleagues. They weren't assets or equipment, as some reports coldly labeled them. They were family. He thought of Luna throwing her weight against Ethan's broken body, refusing to leave him even when every instinct must have screamed at her to flee danger. He thought of Blaze barking himself hoarse, trying to summon help, refusing to abandon hope. They had understood something elemental, something that went beyond species or training, that when one of their own fell, you did not turn away. You stayed. You fought. You protected. And now, someone had dared to threaten that sacred trust. Someone had decided to turn the Guardians into targets. Mark's jaw clenched until the muscles ached. No uniform, no badge, no mission mattered more than this. If they came for his dogs, his family, he would meet them not as an officer following protocol, but as a man defending what he loved. The last of the sunlight faded, leaving the clearing cloaked in heavy blue twilight. The empty chains lay untouched, but their meaning had changed. They were no longer a symbol of Ethan's suffering. They were a warning, and Mark intended to be ready when the brothers came back to finish what they started. The soft, early morning mist hung thick in the air, curling around the tall pine trunks as though trying to keep their secrets hidden. The quiet was broken only by the rhythmic crackle of leaves underfoot, the occasional call of a distant bird, and the steady breathing of two German shepherds trotting eagerly alongside their handler. Mark Travis walked slowly, letting the forest's cool silence settle into his bones, his mind as focused as his steps. Pine Hollow had always been a sanctuary for him, a place of refuge, a place where the weight of the world outside could be temporarily forgotten. But today, there was a new tension in the air. The media had told one story. The authorities had released their sanitized version of events. Ranger Ethan Cole was found injured, a brief, emotionless report glossing over the real horror of what had transpired. But the K-9 units knew what had happened. They knew the pain that had been inflicted, the terror Ethan had endured, and the message it sent to them all. Months had passed, and Mark had seen the subtle shifts in his team. The slight tension in Blaze's muscles when they neared the edge of the forest, the watchful eyes of Luna, who never quite relaxed anymore. And then there were the trails, the faintest traces of paint left on bark, the odd disturbances in the dirt, the unmistakable markers of the Brothers of the Earth, a group of violent survivalists who believed in their sovereign land. They'd taken their threats from words to actions, and they had left a scar on Pine Hollow that would never fully heal. In response, the K-9 units had become more than just protectors. They became hunters. The police department installed hidden cameras along the trails, their lenses silently watching the depths of the woods. Patrols, once routine, doubled. And for Mark, it became a personal mission to teach Blaze and Luna to sniff out any sign of these trespassers. Every day, they trained, each session a reminder of the rage simmering just beneath his calm exterior. Months went by, and each day brought Mark one step closer to the moment when the quiet would be shattered by the arrival of the brothers. But it wasn't just vengeance that drove Mark forward. It was the deep, unshakable bond he shared with his dogs, with Ethan, with every person who had given their life to protect this land. It was a vow that each officer, each handler, each ranger had taken in silence, whispered under their breath during the darkest hours. No one would harm their own again. And then it came. The day Ethan returned to the forest. Mark was standing at the edge of the woods, just beyond the threshold where the shadows of the trees stretched into the soft, golden light of morning. The air was still heavy with unspoken promises, and then, through the clearing, he saw him. Ethan Cole, walking slowly, his movements stiff from months of recovery. But there was something unmistakable in his step. Pride. Ethan's gaze met Mark's, and for a moment, neither spoke. Words couldn't capture the emotions that swirled between them. Respect, gratitude, and something more. And then, from behind him, Blaze and Luna broke into a run, their tails wagging furiously. They knew him before he could even reach them. Ethan dropped to his knees in the dirt, laughter bubbling up from deep in his chest. Tears filled his eyes, blurring his vision, as the two dogs swarmed him with exuberant affection, their paws on his chest, their bodies curling into him. He wrapped his arms around them, holding them close, his breath hitching in the sudden weight of everything that had led them here. They hadn't just found him that day. No, they had done something much more than that. They had saved him. And as Ethan's heart swelled with the realization, maybe, just maybe, he had saved them too. For in that moment, with Blaze's wet nose nuzzling his cheek and Luna's gentle weight pressing against him, Ethan understood what it truly meant to be part of something larger than oneself. A bond forged in the heat of shared adversity, an unspoken oath to protect and serve. Mark stood silently at the edge of the scene, a quiet smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. He didn't need to say anything. The forest had already spoken for them all. It was a new beginning,